Welcome back to the Quantum Feedback Loop podcast, Lewis. It's great to see you again since you were last March, I guess, to talking. Then you were talking about your company, Unanimous AI and Swarm Artificial Intelligence. And today I thought we could talk about virtual reality and your new book, Our Next Reality. So really interested in talking about that.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So, Lewis, you have a deep history in virtual reality since its very early days. And last year you told us about the work that you did with VR in the early 1990s for the Air Force. Wonder if you can give us an overview of how the VR industry has evolved and the major players in it then and now.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, when I first got involved in the space was 1991. Virtual reality was a field that had just been around as a commercial endeavor for a few years. The late 80s is when it first started to gain interest and attraction. Um, I was lucky enough to work at at the virtual reality lab at NASA, where they were doing some of the early research, and that was exciting. And then I went and founded one of the early virtual reality companies, a company called Immersion Corporation that I founded in '93. And the thing about the industry back then, just to give context, is that there was a lot of excitement and hype in the industry. Like there was a exciting industry. There were lots of startups from, starting around 95, 96, 97. We all thought that virtual reality was going to be, take over the world of computing within the next, 10 years. And then the dot-com bubble happened, and all of the money and all the investment went into the internet, which made a lot of sense for where it should go. And the virtual reality world basically collapsed in for over a decade, and it didn't kind of resurface again until really like the 2010s. And so it was a long winter for virtual reality. Uh, at the same time, the field bifurcated, and the early work that I did for the U.S. Air Force was looking at virtual reality and pushing it towards augmented reality and saying, hey, instead of putting yourself in an enclosed world, what if we could merge the real world and the virtual world? And that was the work I did is, in 92, 93, 94. And that thread has continued in research labs for decades, and really finally over the last few years is now becoming something that can be a real commercial product. And it's just because the economic constraints of augmented reality are just harder than virtual reality. And so we had this strange world for decades where virtual reality went into a winter, augmented reality was too expensive, everything was just in research labs. In the 2010s, virtual reality started to come back. And then, 4 years ago, we had the big metaverse excitement. And it was really a push for virtual reality, right? And everyone thought, oh, like we're going to have these virtual worlds that everybody's going to be in. And because it's economically feasible now to do that. But honestly, it didn't happen. And it didn't happen not because it couldn't have happened. It didn't happen because people don't like being cut off from their surroundings. People, they don't really want to spend their time in a virtual world. They want to be able to merge the virtual and the augmented in an augmented reality, mixed reality where content is everywhere. And and over the last few years, while the metaverse hype has kind of died down, the ability to do augmented reality and mixed reality has really accelerated. And so now we're at this really interesting spot where there's low-cost virtual reality hardware, and it's great for entertainment, it's great for gaming, it's great for kind of vertical applications like designers and other people. And so there are great products out there for virtual reality, but it has not transformed computing. At the same time, augmented reality, the hardware has gotten smaller and cheaper. And then there's been one huge change that's going to make augmented reality finally something that's going to going to have a huge impact at a consumer scale, and that changes AI. And so, um, really starting about 18 months ago, Meta was really the first to do this commercially. Is they said, okay, let's take the simplest augmented reality glasses we can make, which have uh, the ability to give you audio and the ability to have even the simplest visuals. And let's put a large language model on these glasses. Let's put cameras on these glasses and use a multimodal large language model that can see your world, see what you see, hear what you hear, and then talk to you. And that's not the vision that people really had for augmented reality in its grand scale, but it's very immersive, right? It's immersive if you're going to walk around your world and an AI is seeing what you see and hearing what you hear and giving you guidance. And this, and so these, we don't even know exactly what to call them. I would call them, AI powered smart glasses, right? Um, but these AI powered smart glasses, Meta has sold millions of them. Google just announced that they're going to be really pushing this in a big way. They're going to launch competitive products to Meta's smart glasses. Apple hasn't announced anything, but I'm sure that they're working in that direction as well. Um, Samsung is pushing in that direction in partnership with Google. And so we're really heading to a world where all of the biggest tech companies realize that the future of mobile computing isn't the phone you hold in your hand and stare down at. The future of mobile computing are glasses that can see what you see, hear what you hear, give you guidance through AI, give you visual information as well. That visual information can be flat content, but they're all pushing for that to ultimately be immersive content that's placed into your world. And the only reason they're not doing the immersive content right now is that's actually the expensive part. Um, but because they have the AI part, it becomes a really useful product even before you get there. So they finally have this roadmap where they can launch basically augmented reality eyewear at scale, be on a road where that's going to replace the handheld phone as the way you interact with computing in a mobile context. And over a series of upgrades, they will have better and better visuals until really within 5 years, we'll have very good visual augmented reality combined with these immersive AI systems. And so I, I think we're really on the cusp now of immersive computing becoming a mainstream technology. And at the same time, virtual reality will gain momentum, but it gain momentum for entertainment, gaming, vertical applications. But again, people aren't going to go out in public with, a big headset. It's just
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I can only imagine this augmented reality going around, reading my emails and text messages in my glasses could be quite distracting, actually. There's so many distractions already, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. And I guess because this is the technology is can be so miniaturized now compared to years ago.
Well, I mean, the ability to do a transmissive visual display that you can see through um, in very small scale. So, and again, it has to be lightweight. It has to have long battery life. It has to just look like normal glasses. I mean, the social stigma of weird looking glasses is really a
Yeah.
huge thing. I mean, Meta partnered with Ray-Ban to make these Meta Ray-Bans that look like normal glasses, and they're trying really hard as they make more next generations not to make them too thick because it's a big barrier. Um, and so it's it, the technology is getting there where they can do the cost and battery life and issues like that. But the bigger issue is they're not relying on the visual part of it as the sole element. Because now with AI, it's the audio part of it. With audio, I mean, these meta systems can have a voice that's giving you guidance in your ears, right? So it's talking to you in your ears, but it's glasses that can, again, it's context aware. So it can see what you see, it can hear what you hear. If you're walking down the street with these glasses and you meet somebody who you can't quite remember their name, we will be in a world where it will just say it will remind you in your ears or visually, oh, this is so and so, or any kind of information that you want. A lot of it's going to be audio because that's a convenient way to get it. And it's exactly the point you said, which is that's visual information is distracting, especially if you're crossing a busy street. The last thing you need is more visual information, but audio content is totally fine. And so the big barrier was the visuals were never good enough to make this a device that people would wear for extended periods and feel like they couldn't live without it. But the audio is really it's so powerful because and again it's context aware. So the types of things that say Meta is doing and Google as well, you can walk into a store and it can see what you see and it will remind you. It'll say, oh, like you need to pick this up. Like, and it's not, and you didn't ask it. It's not like ChatGPT where you ask it a question, hey, what do I need to pick up at the store? It just sees it in the corner of your eye. Hey, there's laundry detergent over there and you're low on laundry detergent. And so that is a really different relationship. And it feels immersive because it is aware of the same world that you're aware of, which was the missing element in augmented reality systems. And now that they have that element, you can ease the visual part of it into the systems and they will get better over time and they will benefit from economies of scale as these devices, are produced in larger and larger volumes. But, Meta's already in the millions of units for their glasses and Google is pushing hard to make their own glasses. And also they have basically their XR version of their Android operating system that they're making available to Samsung and others who are going to have glasses. So there will be a whole ecosystem of Meta devices, Google devices, and there will have to be Apple devices as well.
So I guess, and you mentioned the kind of explosion of the idea of the metaverse. I think that was 2021 when Facebook
Right.
changed its name to Meta. Um, and I think the inventor of the word metaverse was Neil Stephenson, wasn't it? The
Yes.
who wrote an introduction to your book, Our Next Reality. So that book hadn't quite come out, I think, when we spoke last March.
Right.
So yeah, it's now released. And I wanted to talk about that book. I wanted to talk about the AI aspect of things too. I don't want to
Mhm.
leave that point there, but just to introduce the book, Our Next Reality, that you co-authored with Alvin Graylin. Um, you describe your experience with the early prototypes of virtual reality technology. So you've just talked about the kind of latest iteration where we'll have these thin, normal-looking glasses. There's a photograph, I think, of you in the book in the early 90s wearing this kind of almost exoskeleton sort of apparatus. Um, I guess just maybe if you could just take us back to those days in terms of how it was the thought that the technology would be used back then and why was the, US Army and NASA interested in it versus, how it's sort of evolved from what it was thought to be back then to what it is now.
Yeah. So I think you know, the vision of the vision of the potential of virtual reality and augmented reality was really very similar back then, which is, and it comes from this basic idea that, we humans we're spatial creatures, right? We interact with our world in a very visual, spatial way. The way we remember things is very visual and spatial. Um, it's and all of our information has been frozen and locked on a flat screen. And so once we realized, hey, you can create an immersive simulation and allow people to explore information in that way, it was clear that was going to happen. And it just wasn't clear how long it was going to take to happen. And in the early days, the devices were really large and really heavy and really expensive. As you said, the system the photograph that I have in the book is research that I was doing at U.S. Air Force at Air Force Research Laboratory, a system called the Virtual Fixtures Platform, which was really the first experimental prototype for augmented reality, mixed reality, to allow people to see and hear and interact with real and virtual information at the same time. And the system cost about $1 million to build. And the person wore a whole exoskeleton and looked into a vision system. And the exoskeleton had motors in it, so it could give haptic feedback. So you can reach out and grab something and feel it. And my research was really about, if we can allow, if we can really align the real world and the virtual world very realistically in sight and sound and touch, and allow people to interact, does it feel real? Do these two worlds really just feel like one world? And it does.
Hmm.
And what I found was that the fidelity, our brains are very forgiving to fidelity, right? Things don't have to be visually perfect. They don't have to even sound perfect. Uh, but they do have to feel perfect. And I say that because if in a in a virtual world, if my hand, if I go to pick something up, my hand moves right through it, like the illusion is immediately lost. Like we're really sensitive to our sense of motion. It's called proprioception, where our hands move and what they interact with. And we're very sensitive to, when we expect something to weigh a certain amount, if it doesn't. And it's funny because people often think that the hardest part is the visual part, and we try so hard to get the visual fidelity great. And we forget the fact that you can walk into an almost dark room, right? Where you can barely see anything. And it seems completely real. You don't lose, like if you're in a low fidelity visual environment, it seems real. If you're in a low fidelity environment of your motion or touch, you lose all sense of reality. And so that early research, really, helped me understand that ultimately this was going to happen. The barriers were cost, and the barriers were bandwidth. Things have to be, really aligned well in time and in space. And over the years, as the technology got better and better, we eventually got to the point where, these headsets were pretty good and pretty lightweight and pretty small, and it was still a barrier, right? It was still like these virtual environments were still this barrier. And that's when it became really apparent that, the final barrier is that people don't want to be cut off and be just in a virtual world for extended periods. They really want immersive content. They really want to experience, simulations, but it's got to be part of the real world.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting point about the difference between fidelity of touch versus the visual fidelity. And I guess that could maybe lead to some issues. And we'll maybe I want to discuss the issues that you raise in the book. Um, but maybe first, just in the context of what benefits virtual reality and augmented reality can offer. I think in the book you talked about performing a remote operation. Like you could perform a remote operation on a person, or that was one of the ideas back then. So maybe if you could just talk about the main benefits of virtual reality and augmented reality. What can we do things, with them that, and how can we learn with them that we can't without?
Yeah. So some of the benefits overlap and some of the benefits are different. So the benefits of a virtual world is that you can be in a simulated place, and that place could be realistic. It doesn't have to be photorealistic. It could even be a cartoonish world, but still have a lot of realistic properties. It could and But you could be in this realistic world and explore information in the first person. And so, if I am an engineer or an architect, uh, I can, I can explore products that are being designed before they physically exist. I can explore buildings that are being designed before they physically exist. The Because I'm experiencing in the first person, I can walk around a car, a virtual car that's being designed that looks photorealistic. It has nobody had to spend time building it, and I can walk around it and and it's not the same as looking at a picture on the screen because I get a sense of scale. I get a sense of its scale with respect to me. Like it's a completely different experience to be able to have that spatial relationship with it. It's even more valuable if you're designing your building and you can see what is it like to be in that space, to walk through that space. What's it like to to put up a building on a street? Like there's a lot of applications today where it's you're gonna build a building. I can build it virtually and see like what is it gonna block? Like what line of sight is it gonna block? Like there's all kinds of really interesting things that happen. But it doesn't also these simulated worlds you're in doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a one-to-one scale. It could be I'm shrunk down to the size of a virus or a molecule, and I'm visualizing, exploring content that again I can get intuition about by walking around it. What is this? What does this molecule look like? What does this virus look like? And it's again, it will be more real. I will gain more intuition by interacting with it as a spatial object than a flat image on a screen. And so obviously for education, that's interesting, but also for research, there's a lot of really interesting research applications in chemistry and biology where you can actually visualize things that as spatially real objects that you just couldn't have done before, except in virtual worlds. Now, when we bring that to augmented reality, now we can combine that with the real world, and that becomes, really super interesting. So now the same idea that I can have a spatial relationship with a building, right? Well, imagine now I'm in a real physical construction site. I'm in a real physical construction site. I'm wearing augmented reality glasses. The building is partially constructed, and I want to see, well, what is this wall gonna look like when the sheetrock goes up? And I can just see that. I can see that there in place. I can see, I can see how it's supposed to look. I can see the drawings, aligned with the actual building as it's being constructed. Or maybe the building is already finished, and I'm a repair person. I can walk into a building and put on augmented reality glasses, and it has a model of the building, and I can just peer through the plaster and see where the wires are, see where the pipes are, so I can get X-ray vision in the real world. That's useful for all kinds of physical applications. It's also really useful for medicine. So the same thing is already being developed for medicine. There's already systems that are doing this where I have a patient, I get a 3D CAT scan or MRI of the patient. Right now, if I'm a doctor, I can get a 3D MRI and I can look at it on a flat screen. I can look back at the patient, look at the screen, and try to visualize what does this look like inside their body. Now this gets combined with augmented reality glasses, and I can just look at the patient and just peer inside the patient. I can see the inside of their body. I get X-ray vision, and this is doable, and there's already companies doing this during live operations. It's expensive platforms right now, and so they use it for surgical planning and actual live surgery. But we will soon get to a point where it's so inexpensive that the doctor, your family doctor in an office, if you had an MRI of your knee done because you got an injury, they'll be able to just put on glasses, look, and just see the MRI right at your knee, and that will give them situational awareness that they just never would have trying to look back and forth between a screen. And so the types of things that we're going to do, especially with augmented reality in the real world, it will start to feel like superpowers where we will have X-ray vision. We will also have universal translator in these devices, which are already being rolled out by Meta and Google, where you'll be able to just hear somebody talking, and that the large language model will just translate right into your ears. They'll even, we're not that far away from, if you walking down the street in Japan and it's translating the signs. It's just translating the signs and overlaying visuals over the signs, and everything is now translated to English. And so those applications, the AI powered applications, are they're already here, and they're so useful that they will allow these more expensive versions that have the 3D visuals to gain momentum.
Hmm. Yeah, actually, as you say that added dimensionality, putting, as we're talking here on a two-dimensional screen, I'm just imagining if I were able to attend this meeting in virtual or augmented reality, it would be like I was sitting in the same room with you, right? Yeah, yeah, and I can imagine how different that interaction could be as a result. Now, when you say X-ray, yeah,
Especially if we were trying to get work done. Like we
right,
could we could be in an augmented world, and we could be uh, working on the same prototype car together and
right,
walking around it, and so having this shared experience is it's just a very different it's a far more information rich experience than when we're working on flat screens. And flat screens are great. Like we could have a great conversation on a
yeah,
flat screen. It's just hard for us to, work together on some other thing.
yeah, yeah. And when you say X-ray vision, you're not talking about like a doctor can't take X-rays of a person's bones through these glasses, right? Or I
No.
can't walk around and undress people with my glasses.
No, I mean the X-ray vision is that it's allowing you to look inside of a person because the content has already been captured for what's
Right.
inside them. And so in the doctor context, we already, CT scans and MRIs are already 3D models. They're 3D models. Somebody gets sent to get an MRI, and but getting that spatially registered inside the person's body is already doable. And so now with the glasses, you will be literally be able to just see and have everything aligned, and really understand, where is that injury in their body, which in their real body.
Right.
And
Yeah, and so I guess and then how does so you've talked about AI. So how does AI layer on top of the actual physical device, the technology? So how is AI is becoming very powerful. There's large language models now, which, there's a lot of concerns about them as well, but they're very powerful. So how is AI going to maybe supercharge the the rollout of VR and augmented reality technology?
yeah, there's a lot of different ways. The one this one first step, which I've talked about, is again the context aware systems. And so, and just to kind of explain that in a little bit more detail, these large language models are phenomenally powerful. um, it's only been really over the last year or so that they've had the ability not just to understand text language, but images and sounds. And so being able to understand images and sounds is super useful, but it is profoundly useful when it's the images and sounds that you see and hear, right? And so I really have to stress how transformative it is when this large language model, when it can see what you see and hear what you hear, it can answer questions, or it could provide, without even being asked, guidance just based on knowing your frame of reference, knowing what you're looking at, what you're hearing. It it becomes the AI becomes I like to think of it as an entity that's sitting on your shoulder, right? It's sitting on your shoulder, going through life with you, and able to give you guidance from that perspective, which is really different than ChatGPT, which is this disembodied mind inside of a screen that you type things to. And so, in some sense, this ability to have this, assistant that is riding on your shoulder is the killer app. that will drive, you know, extended reality eyewear, right? And it doesn't have to be eyewear also, but there are, it's possible that you could just have earbuds with cameras on them and it can still see what you see and give you guidance. Um, the, there will be companies that make earbuds that do this. Earbuds, they have a pretty good vantage point, but if you have hair that blocks the earbuds, the cameras, like it's not a perfect solution. People have tried, about over a year ago, there was that AI camera pin that you wear, and that doesn't have the vantage point of what you're looking at. So like it really glasses make the most sense. And that's why Meta and Google are investing so heavily in that direction. But there will be earbuds and other form factors. But the key thing is context-aware AI that goes with you through your life, gives you guidance, feels very immersive. That's one of the uses of one. That's one of the first kind of killer apps of what AI will do to drive augmented reality and virtual reality. The next is, both augmented reality and virtual reality have a challenge, which is you really need a lot of content, right? Especially in the real physical world, like you need lots of content to happen. Uh, and you can rely on humans creating that content and putting it all over around the real world. But with the power of AI right now, it will be automated content, right? This content will be created on the fly as you enter an environment based on just high level specifications, and it will create the content. It will integrate that content into the spatial environment so it looks natural, and the ability to create content at scale on an individual level, person by person, is a really important thing for the mass adoption of virtual and augmented reality, just because it overcomes the content barrier. Now, and there will be humans creating amazing content, experiences, creating games, but to have a baseline content that it can be created by AI at an automated level really solves the chicken and egg problem of, getting a piece of hardware and feeling like there is content anywhere you go. There's content. It's and it has to be useful content. It has to be informative content. With augmented reality, that content could be educational content. You're walking down the street and it's teaching you about the history of where you are. It's giving you information about anything that is giving you information about the trees or the plants. And again, it's not like, a phone on your app where you say, oh, I'm interested in what kind of tree that is. And I find the app and I look and it's this whole thing if you really want to bother figuring that out. Here it'll just be, you'll see a tree and you just say like, well, what is that? And it'll just tell you. And it will feel like it's just part of your daily experience. And um, that will make it feel indispensable for people. And and that's why we'll see this rapid adoption and why it will feel like, yeah, there's a really big advantage of this over a phone in your pocket. And even if the phone can do these things, if you take out an app and you point at something and you push some buttons and you could get the same information, really different if you're just walking and you just glance and you get that information and it's we will expect a world where content is just there when we want it in the place that makes most sense for it.
Yeah, immersive in three dimensions. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that leads to, I guess, some issues. And you pointed out quite strongly in our next reality a number of concerns with the technology, as some suggestions. And I wanted to talk about those. So you used the word in what you just last said about the system knowing your frame of reference, and then you talked earlier about being able to walk into a store and the system would tell you, or suggest that you need to buy a certain thing, maybe based on where you're looking or based on what you've bought before. So all of these, we can imagine that there could be some issues, and I guess as much as people design or try to design systems that are error free. There was the error, I think it was last week, where it was that Elon Musk's generative AI started to question whether the Holocaust occurred. So, I guess there's these issues or these flaws. So, yeah, maybe if you could just take us through
Sure.
some of the risks, and maybe particularly the risks to young people from
Mhm.
these systems. Yeah.
Yeah. So these systems, an augmented reality system, in just the next few years will be extremely powerful, right? So it will, for it to work, it has to know where you are. It has to know what you're looking at. It has to essentially know what you're doing, and it will have to have the ability to change the world around you while you're doing those things. There's all kinds of really positive things that it could be done with the device with those characteristics, but there's also really, really dangerous uses of those same characteristics. And the biggest is what I call the AI manipulation problem, which is if uh, if a third party wants to influence you or manipulate you, there will be no more powerful tool than a tool that knows where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, and is able to change the world around you. You could use that to influence people continuously through their day. And some of that influence will be, kind of innocent advertising. I mean, that's really one of the big motivations that people have for developing these capabilities. And some could be really, nefarious forms of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. But just let's talk about kind of the more innocent advertising. You can imagine you're walking down the street in an augmented world wearing glasses. Let's imagine that these are photorealistic glasses where things can be added into your environment in 3D and they just look real. Um, you you could see a world that's different than the person next to you sees, right? There's a customized world to influence you. And so I'm walking down the street and I see a, parked car and I've not seen before. And there's a person, a couple standing outside the car talking about this car, saying, oh, like this is the greatest car I just bought. Like it gets this great gas mileage. It handles so well. And I just walk past and I might just think like that was just real people. That could have not been real people, right? That could have been placed there specifically for me. I saw that because they maybe knew that I'm looking for a car. They know what kind of car I'm interested in. I overheard this conversation. I might not even have been paying attention, but subconsciously think, oh, people like this car. Now that's really different than an advertisement that goes on TV that could be the exact same conversation, right? Like one is I know it's an advertisement. I know to be skeptical. I know, like, yeah. The other is it's embedded in my world. I refer to this as a virtual product placement. It's embedded into my world so naturally that I'm subconsciously influenced and I didn't even know it was an advertisement. And it could be even more subtle. Like I could be walking down the street and somebody can walk the other way with wearing a Red Bull shirt, right? And I just think like, oh, that's a person who likes Red Bull. And again, I might not realize, no, that was put there for me to see. Um, there will also be virtual spokespeople in these worlds where uh, and it could be in a virtual world or an augmented world, but we're now at a point where AI can create photorealistic humans that we humans can't even distinguish the difference. They look perfect, um, and we will be at a point where we might have a conversation with somebody, not necessarily even realize that they're computer generated and not realize that they have an agenda. Like I could be in a store shopping and another person could walk up to me and say, like, oh yeah, I have that laptop. It's great. It's got the greatest battery life. And I might not realize like, no, that was just an advertisement that happened to me. Um, we're a little ways away from that happening in an augmented world and you being fooled, but in a virtual world that could happen today. Um, and it's we we need protections because we're easily influenced if we don't have our guard up. If something is a virtual product placement, it's put into your environment to be a subconscious stimulus, it should look different. You should know that was put there. That was put there by somebody who knew that you were looking at it and not everybody else. Like other people got different products that was put there for you. It should look different. If you engage a spokesperson even on a flat screen, which already looked photorealistic, or in a virtual world or an augmented world, if you engage somebody who's an AI and it has a promotional agenda, it should either have to look different so you know it's an AI, and it should have to tell you it has an agenda. It should tell you, yeah, like you know, I'm gonna tell you about the features of this car because I'm a paid promotion. If we don't tell you, then we can't bring our natural skepticism. And this problem is already gonna hit us today. Like today, we're using ChatGPT and we're using Google search, and these AI systems aren't yet advertising to us, but they will very soon, right? Very soon we'll be in a world where you're talking to ChatGPT, or you're talking to Google, you're talking to any large language model, and if their business model is advertising, the conversation that comes back could weave in promotional content. I could say, I could go on to into a AI-powered search environment and say, conversationally say, yeah, where's the nearest charging station for electric cars? And it could tell me, and then it could say, well, what kind of car do you have? Say, well, I have a Tesla model, whatever. And it could say, well, if you upgrade it to this other model, you wouldn't need to charging station for another 100 miles. And it could feel like, oh, it's just giving me information. But no, that information could be promotional.
Yeah.
And so as we go to this world that's very conversational, like we're going from a world where computing is everything is really clear. An advertisement is an advertisement, a search engine is a search engine. We go to a world where we're just talking to the computer, we're just talking to a photorealistic avatar. If we're not informed when things switch from informational content to promotional content, we are really easily influenced. And if somebody wanted to deploy misinformation that way or propaganda that way, we might not even realize that it was happening. And so we need protections. We need protections as we shift towards conversational computing, which is already happening. As this conversational computing gets matched with photorealistic avatars, we need even more protections. And as these photorealistic avatars get immersed in our 3D world, we need even more protections.
Yeah, and you use that term, a customized world. I mean, that's already being created by a lot of influencers, and a lot of people live in these, bubbles where their reality is different from the reality of the rest of us. So yeah, I can see how it'd be a particular concern, and because seeing is believing, a lot of people just whatever the eyes see, they believe, right? So yeah. So in terms of, but also I think in the book you talk about um, how or concerns about how the biometric data is being going to be stored, and how it's going to be used, and also the emotional data, right? Because I think systems are already collecting information on emotional data, but they're collecting it in two dimensions, maybe. Whereas now you add the third dimension, they're able to measure your blood pressure change. They know where you're looking at. Um, yeah, I mean, so I mean, has there been any discussion about controlling that sort of thing, or is that kind of just really up in the air at the moment?
So there's really two different issues. One is there's what are these physiological characteristics that these devices can track? And AI is making this very, very powerful. So, a camera looking at your face, um, which on just a flat screen with a webcam, or a lot of these glasses have cameras that also look back at you. They can see your facial expressions. They can see your eye motion. They can see your pupil dilation. They can actually detect what are called micro expressions. So, humans are really good at detecting the emotions of other humans, but an AI system is even better because it can detect emotions that are not visible to humans. So we're building these systems that have superhuman ability to read our faces, read inflections in our voices, even look at really subtle changes in complexion. So we humans, if somebody's blushing, we humans know, like we can detect that, like, oh, we know that they're embarrassed. Um, there are micro changes in complexion that an AI can also look at. So you have to think of an AI as having superhuman ability of reading your emotions in real time. Okay, there are some interesting uses of that, but there's also really dangerous uses of that. If that AI is trying to sell you something, right? So now you're having this conversation with an AI system that has a promotional goal. It's trying to influence you to buy something, or worse, trying to influence you to believe something. And you're having a conversation, and it can read your emotions while this is happening. So these systems now become feedback loops where it's talking to you. It gives, it pitches you on a piece of information. You might resist. It might see you're getting angry from that, and it can adjust and try a different tactic. And so these systems can now talk you into believing something or talk you into buying something. That's an entirely new form of promotion and misinformation than we've ever had before. I mean, the way I like to describe it is, today's targeting, like we call this, targeted content. And again, targeted content could be advertising, it could be misinformation or propaganda. But today's targeted content is kind of like buckshot, right? They know some demographic information about you. They know some general things about you, and they'll say, "Oh, let's send that to Lewis," and because it has a high probability of having some influence on me. Now imagine instead that promotional content is having a one-on-one interaction with an AI system. It already knows a whole bunch of stuff about me. So it's going to word its conversation in a way that's very likely to be influential to me. The AI might even have a certain appearance, whether it's age, gender, color of its hair, its accent, the style of its voice. It might be chosen because it's most likely to have influenced me. It will start the conversation, offering, pitching me on, a product or, some piece of propaganda. And based on how I react, it's gonna try to overcome my objection. And it's gonna be, instead of being this, buckshot, it's this heat-seeking missile, right? It's a heat-seeking missile that's designed to find you, to present content to you in a way that's the most likely for you to be receptive, and then to adjust its tactics in real time to talk you into something. And like, we're going to be outmatched. Like it's like these AI systems, they're already, extremely sophisticated in terms of their ability to solve problems and to plan and to reason. And we're just at the beginning. And if the problem it's trying to solve is to get you to do something, it will be very effective. And if it has the ability to read your emotions even better than any human, it will be more effective than any human. So you can imagine, the most skilled salesperson that's super skilled at talking somebody into buying something, an AI will be, superhuman in those abilities. And we don't have protections against that right now. And the
Okay.
protections are, first, what are the emotional characteristics that it should be allowed to track in real time? And the second is, what should it be allowed to do with those emotional? Should it be allowed to use your facial expressions and vocal expressions, vocal inflections, in real time to optimize how it pitches you on something and tries to influence you? I don't think that it should be allowed to, but we don't necessarily have those protections in place.
Yeah, and that heat-seeking missile analogy that you used is quite frightening, actually. When I think of some of the companies developing this, well, I mean, Meta, of course. Meta makes, I published it, I think it's 97% of its revenue from advertising. And then Google was, I think it was about 75% of its $100 billion profit was made from advertising. So if they're some of the big players, I can only imagine, I guess. So,
Which brings up,
yeah,
how can we avoid this
yeah,
problem? We can avoid this problem if we move away from these advertising business models. And yes, Meta and Google have very, very effective advertising business models. It's hard to blame them because we, the consumers, chose that, right? In the early days of the internet, people tried subscription models, people tried advertising models, and we, the consumers, all said, "Oh, we want it for free. Let them advertise." And we didn't really understand that these systems could be so effective at collecting data and having, in some sense, a predatory advertising. We now know that, and we have to realize that it's potentially 10 times worse when we go to a world where advertising is conversational, driven by AI, and the AI can actually read your reactions in real time and adjust its tactics. And
Mm.
so we consumers should say, you know what, we don't want advertising for free. We'd rather pay a subscription for ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever the AI product or tool is, because then we can avoid the motivation for these companies to compete on who can have the most effective conversational advertisement. Instead, they can have who can have these immersive AI systems that are just the most helpful to customers.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very powerful suggestion, I think. And so in our next reality, you made six specific suggestions in your case for immersive rights. And I'm just wondering if you can summarize those for us.
Sure. And I don't have the list in front of me, but I
Mm.
know, some of the big ones are, being able to protect our human agency, right? The right not to be manipulated or influenced. And that gets broken down into, there's having emotional autonomy and uh, and not being tracked emotionally and having basically action autonomy, not being tracked, my behaviors. So I really want to have uh, the ability to know that my behaviors are not tracked and stored over time. I want to know that my emotions are not tracked and stored over time. Each of those are important in themselves because, yes, these systems need to know what you're doing in real time. They need to see your face to be effective in real time. But once they can store these information over time, they can profile you. They can profile you behaviorally. They can profile you emotionally. And yes, systems today already, track your behavior on the internet over time and they know things about you. That's different. That's a total different order of magnitude than a system that knows, how you behave when you're walking down the street, how you react in different situations, how you react emotionally in different situations. Like that information, if they can profile you behaviorally and emotionally, they can now influence you really, really well. If they want to get you to go to a store around the corner and they know how you normally behave and they can optimize that influence. And so giving people allowing people to interact in immersive worlds and know that they're not being tracked and profiled over time, emotionally and behaviorally important, and then knowing that they're not going to close this feedback loop around you where they're going to look at your real-time behaviors, real-time emotions, and adapt its influence to optimize its persuasion is also critical. Another one of the items on this list is being able to know what's real and what's not real. And so if it's a virtual product placement, like I need to know, okay, something was put there in this world and it was put there for me. It's not just an organic part of the world. Um, because if I don't have that context, I lose my sense of cause and effect, right? Like we all go through we all assume we're in a shared reality. And if I walk down the street and I see things, like I assume everybody's seeing those things. And and these systems could break that down, where I could be walking through the world and see things and assume that they're just everybody is seeing them and not know that they were placed there for me. And once I lose that, I lose a sense of agency and I lose a sense of autonomy, and I start to just be, the manipulated test subject in a Truman Show, and not And and so having that be transparent, so I know virtual things look different, um, and I can then use healthy skepticism because I know that was placed there for me. And then even more importantly, if I am engaging with another entity in the world, I have the right to know if it's a human or an AI, and if it's an AI that's promotional, meaning it's going into it's going into a phase where it's trying to sell me something or influence me, it should tell me or it should look different so I know that. Otherwise, I'm just at such an extreme disadvantage to this AI powered world. I lose all agency.
Yeah, yeah, and I think in the book you also talk about how to keep bad actors out of the virtual reality world. These people deliberately setting out to make harm, and maybe it could even be bots. Like we have bots running after us over the internet all the time, right? So how could we stop them from getting into the virtual reality world?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a difficult problem because it's always going to be this arms race. But this the higher level issue of harm is if the business model of the platform is is selling influence. Because most of the harm that happens on the internet is legal commercial harm. It's all motivated, and it is not even intentional. Like you'd mentioned, one of the problems we have is that we're all siloed into these different worlds now because the social media platforms and other content on the internet is giving us the information that we want and giving other people the information that they want. We're separated into different worlds and we live in somewhat different realities. Like that's not intentional. The reason it's happening is these companies have business models of selling influence, and selling influence means I need to know what is the type of content that these people like, and I want to keep these people in my platform longer, so I'm going to give them free content of that type so I can advertise to them more, and it's siloing the world. And so to prevent that same thing from happening immersively and that same thing from happening with AI powered systems that can really influence us, in optimal ways, we need to move away from worlds where selling influence is the currency, right? And instead go to worlds where the currency is providing value to consumers. At that point, now you have bad actors who are just breaking the law, and then it's really up to law enforcement to prevent those types of bad actors.
Yeah. Yeah, and it raises so many issues, and we could have spend hours and hours, I guess, talking about this. But I guess, to wrap up our conversation, in terms of legislation or uh, regulatory actions, is there any discussion about this now? I mean, I'm wondering whether, for example, the European Union's AI Act touches on any of this, or whether there's any international bodies looking at these questions.
So, I mean, the world is scared of AI, and they're looking like so compared to other new technologies that have emerged and regulating bodies being very slow. Regulating bodies have been faster on AI because it it does make everybody nervous, right? Um, the problem is AI is also moving faster than any technology that we've ever had before. So it's a moving target, and it is surprising everybody about how quickly it's moving. So we are behind, even though people have good intentions. Um, and it is, you know, the problem that I see with the regulating bodies is that they're kind of regulating the past instead of regulating the future. They're looking at the ability of AI to create deep fakes and create fake documents and basically create traditional media, which people can already do. Like people have already been able to create fake videos and fake audio and fake documents, what AI can do is they can do it at scale and they can do it cheaply, so it can bombard the world. So it is a new problem. But it's an old problem at scale. And most of the AI regulation has been focused on solving that, as opposed to kind of taking the one step further and realizing, you know what, we're going into this new world where content is going to be very conversational and very immersive, and that the AI systems are going to be able to adapt to each one of us individually. And so, what I really push hard on is to try to get regulators and policymakers to realize, you know, the bigger problem is that these AI systems, if they're allowed to close the loop around us, if they're allowed to adjust their pitch to us in real time as we're interacting, they will be able to optimize their ability to influence us, each one of us individually. And that's just a whole nother level of influence that we're not prepared for. And in a lot of sense, we can't even imagine what it will be like. But we will be in a place in the not so distant future where an, an AI will be able to persuade us at levels that exceed what any human could persuade us. And there are very persuasive people in the world. There are very skilled salespeople in the world. There are very skilled people who can promote propaganda through conversation. These AI systems will be better than all of them because they have the ability to draw from infinite knowledge, and they'll have the ability to read your emotions and your reactions better than any human. And we're not prepared for that.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, I think the problem with legislation is that it's hard to foresee how these things are going to unfold over time. I mean, when the internet started, nobody kind of realized it would wind up being like it is today. So maybe the key is, as you said, or as you implied, to keep the human in the loop, and to make sure legislation is designed so that, as you said, don't close the loop around us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that regulators and legislators just need to be thinking further ahead. And it's hard, like that's it. And again, it's hard and it's moving so quickly that thinking ahead is required just to be on time. But they're really still kind of regulating the past. And they're trying, but it's a very difficult situation. It's a moving target. And a lot of the regulating bodies have restrictions where they can't regulate things that that haven't caused a problem yet. Um, and and that's unfortunate because when things are moving too fast for that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and yeah, we have history to show us how these problems develop over time. So yeah, I mean, I guess, in terms of foreseeing the future, I think your book, Our Next Reality, that you co-wrote with Alvin Graylin, is a really good way of foreseeing a lot of these issues. I think the conversational style of it, where each of you takes turns writing different sections, or writing kind of responses to each other, I think is helpful, because that's kind of the sense of dialogue that I think in terms of regulation and legislation, that sort of dialogue between different perspectives needs to go on. So I really, I learned a lot from your book, and I think other people would too.
So I definitely appreciate that and glad you like the style. And the goal was to write it as a debate. And it's, I take in the debate, I take the side of, here are all the dangers, and Alvin takes the side of here are all the amazing things that are going to happen. And it's not because, you know, I just focus, I'm only focused on the dangers and he's only focused on the benefits. We both see both sides. Um, but it is really helpful to have that dialogue, because it's so often these books will either take one side,
Right.
and um, they'll either seem like they're just promoting, they're promoting the technology, promoting the industry, and showing this rosy future, or they're just all doom and gloom. And we tried to make it so that we can have that debate, because it is like both are true, right? Like these AI technologies can enable amazing things. They're really powerful. They can enable us to interact with information in the natural way. Like like I've talked about all the dangers of conversation and manipulation, but the truth is like we humans want to interact with information conversationally, right? That is like the most natural way that a computer could provide us with information. That's great. And we want to interact with information spatially because that's the way we interact with the world. Like these are positive things, but they're so positive that they influence us like much more powerfully, and we need to look at the dangers too. So, our hope is that people who read the book really come away thinking, yeah, there are significant risks, but there's significant benefits, and the goal is like, how do we navigate this, really important time, like
Mm.
so that we can get to a place where these technologies are helpful and they're allowing us to solve big important problems in the world without creating new big important problems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and the kind of discussion that you and Alvin had in that in the book, I think is very important, and it needs to percolate through through society because it's these things are so important. So I want to thank you for taking your time today to talk to us,
Yeah.
our next reality, as you said, is something that we need to be careful about, but we can also be optimistic about. So I think your book and other discussions that are happening will be very important. And so we'd like to continue talking to you about developments in the space, which I think are going to be very rapid.
Yes. That's the one thing that we can be sure about.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks, Lewis, very much, and we'll look forward to our next discussion.
Yeah, yeah. I look forward to it as well.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Thank you.